Hey, Aaron, how's it going?
People. All right.
How are
Hey,
you?
there we are. Okay.
And
Hi. Thanks, Sarah.
joining us from a tropical location.
Howdy. Bye-bye.
Jealous.
I had to call and get some assistance to get in.
Hey, Felicia.
Hi there. I want to be at the beach. I like your background.
Yeah, I wish I was there too.
Let's hang on about another 2 minutes and we'll get going.
Aaron!
Oh, we have the perfect Brady Bunch boxes there for just a second. Here comes Ethan.
Gosh, Aaron, I've missed you. I feel like we haven't talked in at least a week or so, over a week.
Well, we're gonna have writing an offer. Well, as a companion to Linda's program today, we're gonna go take a deep dive into the paperwork tomorrow. So
Oh, good.
you know how I got like how I love the paperwork. Truly though, that was not sarcastic in any way. But yeah, we're gonna take a deep dive into the paperwork tomorrow, so that'll be really fun.
Good, good.
Perfect timing.
So how are things going with the listing, Gary?
Pretty good. I have a showing. Well, I had a scheduled showing for tomorrow.
Cool.
I plan on doing some open houses this weekend as well. Hopefully, it'll be a bigger turnout. And then I have a an appointment for tomorrow for a listing appointment and a buying appointment. Same. They need to buy and sell, or sell and buy. So I'm getting ready for that on Friday.
Fantastic. How'd you pick them up?
Just through mailing, mailing business cards, social media. I put them on my smart campaign, my smart plan, and he emailed me back from an email out of the smart plan.
Someone from your sphere?
Yeah, someone
Great.
from my sphere. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
Hey, Gary, did you
Yeah.
see on Facebook, someone was looking for a shop and a nice house? On
I
the
did
Keller
see
Williams
that.
site? You might want to follow up with that. I saw that. I don't know what you're priced at, but they were looking for under 800,000.
Oh,
So,
it's well under 800,000.
well, you might want to reach out to them. Maybe
What
they'll,
site is that? Which one is that?
the Keller Williams Facebook group.
Oh, I gotta.
I just saw someone had posted wanting something like that, and I thought of you.
Well, thanks for the update. I appreciate you looking out.
It's actually Ashley Schnee's
okay.
client, and
Okay.
I think I'm going to be on call to show him homes. I think they might be looking for property though.
Yeah, that's the thing, is this house has no property. So no lawn, nothing to take care of. It's practically maintenance free.
It's all house and shop, right?
All house and shop, exactly.
All right, Gary, thanks. Then Felicia, how are things going with you? Sounds like you've been active lately. You're muted.
I'm terrible at this.
No worries. Your
Um,
Facebook has been pushing me all your social media stuff too.
Oh, yeah? Okay, well, yeah, I'm trying to do networking kind of with other agents at Keller Williams. So I picked up some open houses that way. And at my open house on Sunday, I already told the group yesterday, but there were probably 80 people that came through
Whoa.
Thurston Hills home. And so that was fantastic. I just got done working through my list of contacts from that. And I think I have a buyer from California who wants to both buy a rental property and one for herself. So I am starting to send her some homes to look at. It'll be kind of hard to know when to, sort of make a transition and ask to be, to represent her, I guess.
So
Yeah, but
she's not local to the area?
Correct.
She's town.
Yeah,
looking for some
she's
investment property?
She's from the Bay Area, but lived here previously and has friends here. And so she was on her way up to Portland and stopped at the open house. And so I told her on her way back, if she'd like to see more properties, I sent her a list of properties, that meet her criteria. So we'll see.
Fantastic. Did she give you an indication of time frame or?
She's kind of wanting, if the right thing came open, she is ready to jump on it. She's pre-approved already.
Fantastic.
And
Great.
yeah, but she's kind of thinking she wants to wait until October for the market to cool down a little bit. So she thinks the price point might be better then. So I don't know. But she's willing for me to send her things. And I think if something that she really liked came open, that she'd be ready to just go for it.
Certainly, that's great. I mean, October also isn't that far away. And, the other thing I'm sure, for her to keep in mind, I'm sure as you already know and probably explained a little bit, is like any interest rate hike between now and then is going to completely wipe out a tiny decrease in sales prices between now
True.
and then. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, great. Thank you, Felicia. Fantastic. Hey, Maddie, how's it going?
Oh, it's going. Today I did my note cards. I kind of slacked on that before, so I'm starting to try and do the 10 a day. And then I was just working on reels for Instagram and Facebook. And I think that's all I've done today.
Awesome. Thank you. Jennifer, how are you?
Good. I'm working on my buyer presentation. I mentioned yesterday I have friends in Portland that want to buy in St. John's.
Oh,
And so I have to join the RMLS, I think. And yeah, I'm excited for the
what's
mock presentation.
so are they picking up an additional property or are they relocating to St. John's?
They live in St. John's already, and
Oh.
I think they're just renting.
Oh, okay, great. You
First
got
time
them
home buyers.
pre-approved?
I don't know. I just want to practice on anyone. So I almost have it done, the presentation packet.
Uh-huh.
And they said they want to in the future. I mean, so gotta get
Yeah,
it going.
awesome. So you're gonna have them like into the office and do the whole, or you meet with them and take them through your presentation and whatnot. Great.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Tony, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. Sorry, I thought I had my mute on. I'm good. I had a friend reach out to me. They ended up getting a job, and I mentioned this in the class yesterday, that they ended up getting a job offer in Texas. And so they wanted to sell their home, and they're relocating down there at the end of the month. So I set up an appointment to meet with them on Friday and walk through their house and sit down and talk with them. And then I got a call last night that they decided, my friend didn't know it, but his husband had decided that they were going to end up using the same realtor that they used when they bought that house 3 years ago, which I was kind of bummed because I thought that would have been a perfect first time, you know, because it's a friend, an coworker, previous coworker of mine. But I also get it too, like they're being loyal, and I would want somebody to do that for me as well. Like if I helped a family find a home and then 3 years later they're relocating, I'd want them to reach back out to me and use me again to help sell the home. So I was kind of bummed that they are going to go that route instead, but I had to put on a smile. I'm like, I understand. And you know, the loyalty thing, and I would want that too. And so, but anyway, that was a little bit of a disappointment. So there was that. But then this morning, Jen and I, and also Jacob, we did our pledge for NAR, and that was really neat to go to that at the Scottish Rite Center this morning. So kind of was able to mingle and talk to a few other new real estate agents, and it was interesting. I liked that. So
That's so cool.
yeah, so that was my morning so far today.
Well, so just to push back like the teeny tiniest bit,
I
did you
know.
feel like that door is completely closed with that seller?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No. So I said, so my friend, he's like, but if you still want to come over on Friday and like take pictures of the house, if there's anything that, you know, would help you with your training. And I'm like thinking, ooh. So I said, well, I wonder if I could just I've never done a CMA before. And I wonder if I could just, you know, that would be great. I could come over and, you know, you could walk me through the house, and I can use your address because I kind of fibbed a little, well, not really fibbed, but I just said, I'm really kind of trying to focus on the Salem area because I live in Independence. And so for me, you know, I kind of want to focus on that area. So your house is dead center in a perfect area that I'd love to get some practice on. I could, you know, practice a CMA and, you know, all that. And he's like, oh yeah, come on over on Friday. And, you know, and so, I mean, I know you don't know, like maybe I can present something where they might go, oh, actually, let's go with Tony instead. But
Well, so that was going to be my suggestion. I mean, obviously, if that other agent already has the listing and the paperwork is done, then
yeah, I don't know about that
then
yet.
forget about it. But
Yeah.
otherwise, you know, if you could ask for the opportunity to interview for the job yourself, and maybe they could listen to their agent that they know, and then listen to your presentation and then make up your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of
Maybe.
thing. So if you want to discuss that a little bit later on when class is over today, I'd be happy to. But
Okay.
you know,
Yeah, 'cause I
since
didn't
that door's
wanna-
completely closed. Maybe you can, you know, be like, well, you know, if you want to let me interview for the job too, I you know, think I could offer something great to you guys. So
Yeah.
let's think about that later if you want.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you.
So, thank
That's
you.
why I kind of had that in mind, thinking it's not totally shut. So I wonder if there's a way I can like finagle my way in there to kind of,
Yeah, if the listing paperwork isn't done and you know
right.
they would be
Yeah.
willing to interview you as well, then I would say go for it, of course.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay. I'll reach out to you after.
How's it going, Rosie?
Good. Just had someone confirm with me they want to list in a couple of weeks. There's just a couple drywall repairs they have to do. So if anybody
Awesome.
knows anybody who knows drywall, hit me up. I also have a strong lead, and I'm going to do a buyer's presentation either this weekend or next weekend with someone that my husband introduced me to from his work. So a couple strong leads.
Fantastic.
We also looked at some with that same person who's going to list one of the Hayden developments here in Springfield. And it sounds like they're going to build. So that's pretty much in the process too. So, yeah.
And so you're gonna do your
I'm sorry, you cut out on my end.
your buyer that you want to do the presentation with isn't available during the week.
No, they're not.
Do you have your key fob for the office so that you can access the office space over the weekend if you need to?
No, I don't.
So if you want to do the presentation in the office and utilize the office space, because we can use it basically 24/7 for whatever we need, just stop by Lauren at the front desk and get a key fob for the office so you can, if you want to do your presentation like on a Saturday or Sunday, that you can still do that.
Yeah, that would be great. That'd make me look a little more professional.
Yeah.
Yeah. So several things in the works.
Amazing. Thank you. Hey, Jackie, how's it going?
Going good. Today I was working with another agent to get an open house ready and set up for Sunday. So that will be good. I was working with a lender to do like co-marketing with him, and he got it all set up and it's really awesome looking. So I'm excited for that. And with that, I think I only got like 3 contacts today. But I've been working on just my listing presentation, my buyer's presentation. So that way, hopefully when I do get a client, I am ready to go.
Great. So I think last week on office hours, we kind of had a bit of a line going, and I think you kind of had hopped on, but I didn't get to your question. Did you get your question answered that you had? Okay, good.
Thank you.
Hey, Michael, how's it going?
Going good. Had a lot of follow-up today, so I've just been answering calls and emails. But luckily 2 people have got pre-approved, so that's really good. And then, so yeah, overall, I've had like 6 lines of communication we're going over with today, and then potentially I have a showing for another agent tonight, just for practice and help them out.
Cool.
Yeah, it's kind of out a little ways in Fox Hollow, but it's towards my end of the neighborhood, so I don't mind. But yeah, overall, that's pretty much like on the works.
Yeah, I mean, I'll still pick up extra showings for folks here and there. If someone's like offering $25-30 to do a showing, I'll be like, sure,
Yeah.
why
Why not?
Awesome. How's it going, Ethan?
Good. So I scheduled 3 showings yesterday, and I actually took a family member there just to practice, and I'm really glad I did.
Good.
Because yeah, just like opening doors and finding where the locks were and where all the keys were, that was really good. And I'm used to just having that digital lock to get in, so actually having to use a key, that was really good. And all the doors were different on how you had to open them, so that was really good practice. And just walking in and just practice, like showing the homes and like, oh, this is this room, and just kind of getting that practice in was really great. And yeah, that's mainly what I've been focusing on.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, it's not a lot of fun to fumble with the lockbox and the locks in front of your clients. So good job there. And Oriana, how's it going?
It's going good. I went to the MVAR meeting this morning, so hung out with some loan officers after the meeting, which was really good. I have had a meeting with a reverse mortgage person who set me up for different senior networks to start visiting. And I had a family member reach out to me that is in insurance in Washington, and we have a Zoom meeting after this meeting.
Fantastic. Thanks, Oriana. So I will see everyone back tomorrow as we take a deep dive into the residential sales agreement and really come over, I mean, pretty much every line of those 11 pages. So look forward to that if you like to go through the paperwork. But for today, for make and receive offers, we have from our Eugene Springfield office, Linda Reed. Linda Reed got licensed the same year I did in 2017, and she's been a solo agent ever since. She's been in the top 20% of production out of our Eugene office, and she's served on the culture committee since joining KW. She's a big proponent of being a lifelong learner, has participated in BOLD several times, and rarely misses an opportunity for a special training or when we bring in speakers. And I will hand things over to Linda for make and receive offers. Hey, Linda.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Aaron, for that. And I'm ready to get started and just dive right into this, because this is a really fun part of being an agent, is being able to make the offers, or if you're on the listing end, to receive offers. And so you all are coming at a time when we've had this explosive market in the first half of the year, and now it's kind of quieted down a little bit compared to where it was. However, multiple offers are still happening out there. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. I know before I do that, however, several of you mentioned where you were from. If you wouldn't mind just giving me a shout out to say if you're from, what area you're from. So if you're Eugene Springfield, or if you're from Salem or Portland, so that I just know kind of where you all are located.
Eugene Springfield.
Eugene Springfield.
Okay.
Same.
Eugene Springfield.
Eugene Springfield.
Okay,
Salem.
Mariana, okay, great. And somebody, there was, we were clouded over, it looks like two people spoke at the same time. I didn't get one here, a couple of shout outs back.
Southern Oregon.
Say it again.
Southern Oregon, so like Bedford.
Southern Oregon, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I'm
Salem.
Eugene Springfield also.
Okay,
Portland.
great. Who's from Portland? Ethan?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, just so that you know, and this is kind of off topic, and let me say first that I am really bad about sticking to a script. I'd rather talk about real life experiences and share things that have happened to me that this presentation will bring up in my mind, because we can all read. You can read the text of this on your own. But for me, what I learn from stories and from activities that other agents have had, more so than I do than reading the material. So I didn't say that so that I don't shortchange any of you, but just if you have a question as I go along, just interrupt me, raise your hand, whatever. I can see you guys at, yeah, I guess before I do this, I've got to figure out how to get out of here. I forgot that part. Oh, Lordy. I swear sometimes I hate these presentations, because when you only do them twice a year, you know, you just don't remember what you're supposed to do. And there's gotta be a page in here where I get to this, says share screen. I don't know if that's, no, maybe I have to pull up oh Lord.
Something about a green box at the bottom. The other.
Well,
Yeah, maybe at the bottom or at the top of the screen.
well, there it says share screen, but that I think I have to, before it was, this whole setup was slightly different. So well, just give me a second, because I do have a PowerPoint that maybe I can upload that. All right, let me just try that. I'll go in here to my come on, come back here. I wonder which one. Well, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. If I goof it up, then, oh, here we are. Okay, can you guys all see that?
No.
Well, why not? Okay, so let's go back here. So. Okay. Somehow this has got to be able to be loaded up, so. Well, it might be a really interesting presentation where we just have our faces on the screen. So this is the first time I've never been able to get it to load up. So just give me half a second longer, and I don't like to waste your time. So
No worries.
okay, so here's iPhone whiteboard. So it says select a window. Well, what if I select this one? Maybe it's files. Okay, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. We are going to advanced sharing, multiple can share, participant can share. Oh my gosh. All right, okay, well, that does it. I'm not gonna, okay, are you all still there?
Are you figuring this out? I could try to help you if need be. I don't know if I can.
Well, what I need is I have the presentation in a PowerPoint on my laptop, but I can't figure out how to get it to load up to share it on this screen.
So screen share, right?
Well, okay, so right now, none of those little box, okay, here we go. It's share screen. I've got that, but it doesn't show me how I get it open. Oh, here it is, right
So
here.
you double click on it is on the screen you see on when it share screen, it opens up a screen, then you double click and there you go. And then you can maximize and then
Okay, so I gotta get
you can just hit, yeah, and then hit the play slideshow.
I'm gonna hide that thumbnail. Okay. All right. So now, are you all on board with me? Can you see that? It says receive offers session number 9.
Yep, we can see it.
Awesome. Thank you. Then I don't look like a total idiot. Okay. So I'm going to fast forward us here to I am on my page 5. Now, well, I'll just scroll through these as they're on the screen. So the first one is talking about what our expectations are for the class. And this is what you're supposed to have brought. And they didn't do anything about it. Since we've been on Zoom, they don't have us. I haven't in any of the classes that I've done, I haven't had you make calls, nor have I asked you for your contacts. And it seems like Erin was kind of doing similar to that process. When we're in person, it is handled just slightly differently. Okay, so this says turn to page 8. No, we're not going to do a call. Nope, can't do that. Okay. So this presentation is based on both whether you're presenting the offer as a buyer's rep or if you're receiving as a seller's agent. And so this next page is talking about the offer process. So let me see when I get to my own script here and see what we have. Just going back to that where they want you to put these contacts in your database. I can't stress enough how important it is to, when you make contacts, to have some sort of list that you work from every day. And they give you some good models to use in this, in your Ignite forms that you have. In the beginning, I was so overwhelmed that I had a hard time keeping pace with putting people in there, especially if I was making calls. And when you do things like Bold, they have you making 20 calls a day and all of that. And so, but really important to be able to follow through that process of putting them in your, on some sort of contact list, and then doing follow-up and sending those thank you cards out. So now on this offer process, the process of moving from a buyer or seller agreement to a sales contract, it says if you represent the buyer, your search is paid off and your client has finally found their home. If you represent the seller, you've diligently marketed and prepared the property for sale and received an offer from a prospective buyer. So the little funnel just kind of shows you is an activity funnel. So your leads and then the appointments that you have and how they all kind of trickle down until you actually get to a point where you're going to write a contract. And I will say, somebody was talking earlier in the introduction portion of the class about contacts that you got at an open house and that sort of thing. One of the things that I did when I first started was, and Trenda used to have an office in our Keller Williams Eugene Springfield office, and she has a company called Marketing and Design. And she, I got my business cards from her. She did the Photoshop for my headshot for my business cards and that sort of thing. And then she does these monthly mailers that are postcards. And so I had a database of about 200 when I started, of just people that I had known. And I started sending out the monthly mailers. And so those monthly mailers are things like, and it's similar to a SMART program, only with hers, you're offering something for free for these people. So they may get a free hamburger, or they may get a free truffle, or free macaroons, or a free car wash. And they have a 30-day expiration. So oftentimes the whole point is if somebody's teetering on eventually selling their house, they'll save those little cards because it's something free. And then in theory, you hope that they put your name out there at forefront in their mind, and that they will eventually call you. And just as feedback, I had this one woman that my hairdresser had given me 5 years ago, and I can tell you exactly, I was sitting in an Ignite class when it happened, and we had to make our calls to prospects. They gave us 15 minutes to our database. And if we didn't have anybody on our database to call, then we had to cold call people. So I called my hairdresser, and she said, well, I noticed one lady that eventually she's going to sell her house. And so she gave me her address, but she didn't have her phone number. So I put her on that monthly drip list. And so she's been on that list for 4 or 5 years now. And she called me the other day, and I knew exactly who she was because I've seen her name every single month. And she said, I just wanted to tell you that I made up my mind 2 years ago that when I got around to selling my house, that I was going to use you as my agent. And she said, it's a non-threatening way that you're always just raising your hand and you're saying, I'm still here. And I went and had the appointment with her. She doesn't plan to sell until next year, but we just had a delightful time. I took pictures, even though I hire a professional photographer to do that sort of thing. And I'm just telling you this so that you know that sometimes you go through the process and you don't know if you're getting results until something pops up and you know that they came from your database mailings, that they just didn't arbitrarily go, oh, that's right, Linda Reed sells houses and I need to reach out to her, because somebody else will come along. It's like a shiny dollar. They'll come along and they'll forget all about you. So you do have to make some sort of effort so that you stay in front of your database. The other thing that I will say, and this is just a little bit off topic, but I know one of you were talking about the listing that you thought you were going to get, and then that you got aced out by the previous agent. And that's probably one of the biggest disappointments that you'll have in real estate, is that there's going to be really good friends of yours that will not hire you. They'll go with someone else. And it's really hard to swallow. But just know that they have their own reasons. It doesn't necessarily mean it's because they don't think you have the skill set to do it. Sometimes they're sort of under the misguided approach that you're going to know all about their financial status. And so sometimes they don't, because you're a friend, they don't want you to know that sort of thing. So anyway, just know that those are the kind of disappointments that will happen. But then you'll get these lovely people that you don't even know that are on your database because somebody gave it to you, and it will turn into something. So just part of it is just always stay in activity, and it will pay off. So we're back here to the offer process. So buyer makes an offer, and then in the graph, it talks about counters to the offer. So we're negotiating, and then the seller's going to respond in one of 3 ways. So he's going to counter you, he's going to accept it, or else he's going to reject the offer. So the first thing that I would say is that when I have a listing, and I do about 50% buyers and 50% listings. So when I am a seller's agent, it's amazing how many times I have accepted the offer, or I got enough information from a buyer's agent that I knew that that was going to be my particular buyer, that this was the one that I was going to get me over the hump, and it was going to be the offer that I wanted. And let me give you an example. I had a house in South Eugene. This is in like February of this year. And it was about 2,000 square feet. The house had not been updated, but it had been extremely well taken care of. It was built on a slope. It was a tri-level house. And I priced it at $420, and it was probably under the market at the original list price, but I did it partially because when you would walk in from the garage into the first level, that was a concrete floor, but it was covered with a kind of rust colored carpet. And it wasn't a 1970s carpet. I thought it was, but she had put it in, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago or so. But that whole room was kind of a chocolate brown paneling, and it had a medium brown colored brick for the fireplace. And she was going to have it painted. And when I first talked to her in October, she told me she had a bid to have the house painted inside, and it was going to be $6,000, but she primarily was interested in getting that little family room area painted because it was so dark. And I said, look, if you paint this one, then the rest of your house is going to not look so good. And I don't know if that $6,000 price was for every room in the house, but I said, if you start with one area, then it makes and it's all nice and shiny and clean. It makes the rest of the house, then it's glaring that it needs improvement. So I said, I would save yourself the $6,000 and do nothing. So when February rolls around, she had, for example, upstairs in the master bedroom, it had probably pretty close to original carpeting, and it was a dusty pink. It was horrible, but she had really pretty furnishings. She had really nice bed linens and everything, and the decorations were quite nice. And again, it was too expensive for her to do anything to make any improvements, so she just had to go with it the way that it was. So when I walked in February, when she wanted to sell it, I said, you have to, you're going to have to declutter and take out anything that is religious. She was very religious woman, and she was Catholic, and she had crosses and religious sayings everywhere. But I said, you've got to minimize those. I don't mind if you leave a few out, but you cannot have them in every single room and have it. So I said, you really have, and it was not as much about the religious symbolization as it was about decluttering. So she did a really good job, and this lady was 82 years old, but she got right with it, and she decluttered really well. She started packing up things, taking trips, and we only had 5 days to get this thing listed because I had already made an offer for her on another property, which we were in contract for. So we had a real need to get this thing sold fast. So I had the pictures taken and everything. We went live, and the offers came in like bam. People were looking at it. It was a steady stream of people coming through. And my very first offer was an offer at $440, reminding you that I had it listed at $420. And so my first offer was $440 cash. And the rest of the offers were substantially more. And before it was over, I had 3 offers that were all over 500,000. But sometimes what you need is that first offer to come through, because after you get an offer, you can then say to the next agent that calls you, you can say, they'll ask you, do you and this goes both ways. So when you're a buyer's agent, when you either call to make the appointment, and I suggest just calling these agents. There's some of them that the only way that you're going to get them is to text them. But so to show the property, sometimes I'll text them if that's, if I'm in a hurry myself, or if I've called them and they didn't pick up, then I'll text. But once you have an offer in hand, every single buyer's agent that calls after that, you can say, again, I had listed at $420. I can say I have one offer in hand, it is over asking. So everybody then from then on is going to write you an offer that's an over asking offer, because they know that why would you take something less? unless they had waived all inspections and all of that. So, but what happened with this buyer's agent is she called me that night. We went live like 4 o'clock. And so she went and looked at it right away. And she called me and said, I'm sending you an offer and it's cash. But she said, let me know if you get other offers because I know I can do better. So I just kept that in the back of my little brain. And as the other offers started coming through, she would call me, and some agents would get really perturbed at this. And I was starting to say I've never done this, but that's not true. But she would either text me or call me every 2 to 3 hours that next day. And by the end of that day, I had other offers in hand. So the very next morning, the seller wanted to go look at this house that she had purchased, but I also had to go to Cottage Grove for another property that I had. I called the buyer's agent of my cash offer, and I said to her, this is the story. This is what I have. And I had permission from my seller, and this is called shopping the buyer, but I had the permission from my seller to tell what the offers were. So I called her and I said, I have 3 offers, all of which are over 500,000. And when you get offers, all offers, even though they're bright and shiny like this 500,000, all offers are not workable offers for your sellers. In this case, 2 of those offers that I had over 500,000, one of which was at 528. I didn't get it until later. I knew it was coming. I just didn't know what the price was going to be when I called this cash buyer's agent. And so I went with the one offer that I had in hand, knowing that I had these other 2 coming that would all be over 500,000. And I said, I've got an offer at 510, but that offer was also contingent on them selling their property. And they were in contract, but I was also contingent for my seller, contingent on selling this property for her to be able to buy this other property. And in a hot market, you're not going to get the seller on the other end of my, that was the house that we were purchasing. They're not going to, you have to get their permission if you're going to sell a property that's contingent on your buyer selling theirs. So that's 2 contingents on both ends. In a soft market, that'll work. In a market that's blowing and going, that will not work. So I called the buyer's agent and I said, look, you've got an hour I've got to go to Cottage Grove and back. It's going to be quick, but you've got an hour to get a hold of your buyers. And I have an offer at my best price is 510. I didn't know what the other 2 were. I said, my best price is 510. So just get me somewhere between 500 and 510 and we'll do this deal, because again, it was cash. And they had written their offer that they were going to have an inspection, but they didn't plan to ask for any repairs. And because it was cash, there was no appraisal. We didn't have to deal with appraisers at all. So that part didn't matter if it was overpriced. So she came back to me within 5 minutes and they paid $511 because they did not want to miss out on getting that piece of property. So, but part of the reason that I was so receptive to this, I knew when she told me that she knew she could do better. That was just music to my ears. And I always knew that I was going to go back to that buyer's agent and try to negotiate the best price that I could. But because she kept contacting me and wanting to know, have you gotten any other offers? And she was just getting a status update all the time. So I knew that she was highly interested. So the communication process, you have to be careful not to annoy the listing agent because they're pretty busy with getting other people that are, particularly if they aren't using Showtime, which I don't use the Showing Time app. But anyway, you don't want to be annoying to them, but if you can develop a good rapport with that listing agent so that they will either come back to you or give you information, it works both ways. So it's kind of a long story to explain that how important the communication is with that listing agent to get your buyers a good look. Does anybody have any question?
I was gonna say, what's the time frame from when you get that offer to, I mean, you tell your client right away, if you're the selling agent, right, you're telling your client, how long do they have before they have to give either counter or an accept or reject?
Okay, well, that depends on two things. One is once I get, sometimes if I know it's going to be a property, I put in my private notes to the agents, I write all offers are due by such and such a time. So let's say I list on Thursday and I say, in this case, I didn't even plan an open house because I didn't think it would last through the weekend, and it didn't. So we let it run all through Friday. So I went live about 4 o'clock on Thursday, but then I made a notation in that for the private notes for people to have their offers to us by Saturday afternoon, evening at 6 o'clock. So most of the agents, once you set a deadline, then they'll make their response time that their agreement or their offer expires. And I never suggest that you make it for right at 6 o'clock, because in this case, I had 8 or 9 offers and I had to, and some of them I could have had more. But I finally got where I would just say to the agents when they'd call and want to show the property, I'd say I have 3 offers over 500,000, and they go, okay, we can't play because it was a $420,000 listing. So then they didn't, waste my time or their time or get their buyers' hopes up by writing an offer that wasn't going to get accepted. So when you as a buyer's agent are going to write that offer and you know that there's a deadline to have your offer submitted by, then I would make my expiration time 9 p.m., give them 3 hours. Because, when I set up my computer, when I start getting that many showings and that much activity, you kind of have to be at your computer. You can't be out showing houses to other people and doing other things because there's so much activity on a property like that. When you're a solo agent, you don't have somebody else that can do it. So I am at my computer fielding all of that. And so I start on my Excel spreadsheet, because when I go to meet with my clients, I have developed a little Excel spreadsheet that I'll have the client's name, I'll have the time when their offer expires. I put what they're offering, if they've written an escalation clause, what the maximum is on that, how much more, that a separate column. So if they're paying $2,000 over the best price, or if somebody's just offering $500 over the best price. And personally, I would never write one that's just $500 over the asking price. I would not go any less than 1,000. And sometimes I make it an odd amount. So if somebody else was at 1,000, then I'd make it 1,800 or 1,500 or something like that, just to make it enough that it's worth their while to take a look at my offer. Then I have a column that is what type of financing do they have? Is it cash? Is it FHA? Is it VA? And I put down how much their earnest money is, how much they're going to put down for their down payment. So if they're putting down 20 or 25%, all of that. Sometimes it doesn't even make it a difference if you know that they're qualified to buy the property, but I put down as much information that can help my client know which one is the best offer. And trust me, your sellers their eyes are going to glaze over when you tell them you have 8 offers and they're trying to keep it all straight. So as I make it as simple for my sellers as I possibly can. And when I have a copy of that spreadsheet for me, I have a copy for them, and I do it I change my font colors so that the parts that I want them to really zone in on, I highlight it in red or blue or something like that. So I make it as self-explanatory and easy to follow as I can. So in answer to your question, there is 2-part. It's up to the listing agent to provide that information. The best way to provide the information is to post it in the private remarks on the RMLS and set a deadline. There is a controversy between agents, or some of them don't think that that's a responsible thing to do. And they sort of feel like it's more than what we should be doing. I don't agree with that. I do it many times. And if you don't, then all of a sudden you've got multiple offers. Nobody knows when to write it. You'll get somebody that wants to really push in. They'll write an expiration that's 6 hours out. They'll give it to you at noon and they want an answer by 6. I've actually done that myself because when I know there's no other offers, I want them to tell me right away. And so I just, I ask the agent, are your sellers available to make a decision right away? And if they say yes or no, or sometimes they'll say, well, no, they're out of the country or they're traveling. And it's amazing how many people will sell a house and go traveling, and which is always kind of mind-boggling to me. And sometimes they're in a different state like Hawaii, which is 2 hours time difference and things like that. So you really have to collect a lot of that information by talking to that agent and giving yourself plenty of time. So it's, I set that deadline so that everybody, because I don't know if you've gone online, and sometimes it helps just to track a particular listing that looks interesting to you, and you just want to see how much over the market it sold for, if it was cash, gather as much details, how long it was on the market, all those kind of things. And so I click on that watch list on a listing, and it's right there on the right-hand side. And so anytime that a listing agent makes a change to that particular listing, then anybody that has put that on their watch list, and definitely if you are making an offer on a property, you want that on your watch list so that you get all the update information and know that there's been a change made. And then, so I set that deadline. Some of the agents don't set the deadline until they've got their first offer. I have found that for the most part, you're better off to set the deadline, and don't make it too far out. If you make it sometimes I've set it for Monday at 5 o'clock. It just depends on the speed of the market. So that I gave the whole weekend, if I listed on Thursday or Friday, I gave the whole weekend to the market to bring me multiple buyers and to get really good looks and lots of eyes on the property so that I get multiple offers. And so sometimes I'll set it for Monday at 5 p.m. But I've also been in situations, the house that I told you about where I had the cash buyer that I went back and told her that I had these 3 over $500,000 offers. We pulled the plug Saturday night, and I had listed either Thursday, I think it must have been Thursday nights when I listed, like 4 or 5 o'clock. So, but I sold that house for $86,000 over the listed price. So at that point, we knew that we weren't going to get anything better than that. And it was cash, which meant that she was going to close on the purchase of her house within 3 weeks. And we had asked for 60 days on the purchase house. So that it all just worked out marvelously. So she was able to get into her house earlier she didn't actually move, but in the new house, she was able to get new carpet put down and that sort of thing. So for many reasons, it was, that cash offer just worked out so well. The fact that there was no appraisal, they did have an inspection, they didn't ask for anything. And we were done with it in 3 weeks. So now, did I answer that completely to your satisfaction, or is there anything else that I?
Well, I'm just like trying to compare it to current times, the shift. It seems like you're explaining one that's like in this really super hot market. That's all. I'm just trying to make it kind of relevant to these times. And because I just got a listing and I'm like, well, should I have put a time limit on it? I don't know. This is the first I've ever heard about putting like a time limit on offers. Or
What's your showings like? Are you getting a lot of showings?
I mean, no, not really. I've had two. I've had one, and I have one scheduled for tomorrow.
Okay, then I would not put a all offers by such and such.
Right. That's kind of what I'm figuring is it doesn't seem like it's, that not flying off the shelf kind of market right now.
Well,
For
honestly,
this particular property, maybe, I don't know.
yeah, well, just judge each property on its own merit, and
Right.
you can, so particularly if you can kind of hedge your bets a little bit, if it's a new listing and somebody wants to write an offer on it, and you get that first offer in hand, you might say something like this to that first buyer's agent that comes through, say, we'd like to have an open house so that we get more eyes on the property for the weekend. So can you give us till for the expiration? So if they write you an offer on Friday, then ask for it to have an expiration for Sunday night. So because you'd have a open house either Sunday morning or early afternoon. So then you could put ask that buyer's agent to set the time expiration to Sunday at 6 p.m. But I will tell you that I've had in the last month, I had a listing that I had down in Camas Valley. And so I've kind of worked all over the state. My primary market is Eugene Springfield, but this was a little place that was down in Camas Valley. So that's down by Roseburg. I've had houses that I've sold in Heppner, Oregon. I've sold them in Gresham. I've sold them in Depot Bay. So if I'm, I only do the ones that are kind of out of the, if I can work it into my schedule. But anyway, I just had this little property down in Camas Valley, and it was cheap. And it had a house that was a total gut job on the interior, but it had 7 acres. And I had lots of showings with that thing and lots of interest. And I got cash buyers that made offers on it before I was live. I'd put my for sale sign up because I had to go down there, but I wasn't actually live yet. So I started getting these offers just from the locals that were interested in it. And as it turned out, I had 3 written offers then, and it got really crazy on that thing. And so I finally had to set a time on it. I got the first one and I said, well, give me, because I knew that I had the weekend coming up and I had 3 people that were going to look at the property over the weekend. So I asked for time for Saturday night, and I had gone live earlier in the week. So sometimes it's just a matter of talking to the people that are showing the property, and you'll get a feel for it. The other thing is that if you've listed the property and you're not getting a lot of activity on it, and you price it at such that your sellers are going to be happy with that. Let's just say that you listed it at 300 and you get an offer at 295. But you've had limited showings, and you get an offer, if you haven't had many showings, I would, I would just talk to my sellers and say, well, how do you feel about accepting this offer, this counter offer? Because we are seeing a slowdown, blah, blah, blah. And then it's up to your seller to say yes or no.
Right.
So it's gonna, I'm afraid that right now, as we're trying to figure out what this market's gonna bring us, it's just a matter of communicating with everybody. And once you get the first offer, if you've had showings, then you can set the all offers are due by such and such a time.
Okay.
And, so, yeah. Okay, any other questions? Okay. When you're representing the buyer, so preparing to write it, checklist for preparing an offer, write the offer, checklist for writing, present the offer to the listing agent. Now, here's one thing that I will say to you as a buyer's agent. Do not rely 100% on email. That little property that I had down there in Camas Valley, I already had a weekend trip planned before I had taken that listing. And I was going to be out of town on Saturday, but I was going to be available to talk to people that Saturday night. And so I already had one offer at that point before I left town. And on Friday afternoon, I was traveling to my destination. So I was not sitting in front of my computer. And so in the late afternoon, I had an agent call me, and he said, I sent you an email to let you know that I was sending you an offer. Well, my offer number one, we were listed at 129. And that offer number one had said to me, ask your seller what kind of price it would take for him to take this property off the market and not hold it open this weekend. So my seller came back and said 140. So, and she just called me while I was traveling, while I was commuting to my destination. And so I gave her the verbal that we would accept 140. Well, then when I got to my destination and I got a call from offer number two, and offer number two was not happy because he had sent me an email saying that he was going to send me an offer. Well, because I was traveling, I'm not reading emails while I'm driving. So he just made the assumption that I had seen his email, but had chosen to not even take a look at his offer. So he was pretty hot under the collar. And I just said, well, you're operating from a bad assumption. Here's what happened. He should have called me. And that's why I say don't rely 100% on email.
If it was that important, then he should have called you. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I say that's on him.
Mhm.
And so as it turns out, he ended up, he sent me the offer. Then he called me back and he said, I forgot to put an escalation clause on there. And I said, okay, well, send me an addendum. And then he not only sent me one addendum, he turned around and sent me a second addendum that he put a really high price on the escalation clause. So we did end up going with his offer, and mainly because they waived condition and everything. They weren't going to have inspections, but offer number one, this property had 2 wells on it, but neither of the wells had an operating pump. They had been stolen off the wells, and the house had been abandoned. No one had lived in it for 2 or 3 years. And so the septic wasn't working. So we didn't know the condition of the septic either, but they were going to have all of these inspections done. And when I finally got the offers, because originally the 140 sounded really good, and that's why my seller said, oh yeah, we'll take it. But then when I got to my destination and actually read the complete offer and saw that there was this well addendum, and that if that didn't, they were going to do a well flow test. Well, for all we knew, it could have had a dry well, because the people that had been renting this property were growing pot plants in the back end of it. And it was later, we don't know if it's true, but they said that they thought, the neighbors thought that the guys had run the well dry. Well, we didn't know if it was dry or not, but we were selling.
Most likely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, most likely. But we sold as is. We said that there's been two wells, don't know condition. And so, but offer number one, even though they came in with this 140 price, was going to have these inspections on the sewer and everything else. And so the other offer where they waived all of that was by far the best offer.
And those were the time frame in between those two offers. You're talking in the same day, hours,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I say one of and it takes cooperation on both ends, because you have to have a listing agent that will answer their phone. And sometimes you don't get that, and it can be extremely frustrating. So I say this to you not only as having had my share of being stiffed by the listing agent for not being able to get the communication that I wanted in there, but also as a listing agent, how important it is to be able to be accessible to those people. So you'll figure it out, but it does make a huge difference. Okay. Okay, we must have some scripts in here for, okay, checklist for preparing an offer. Okay, let's go over this checklist. So this must have been back on this previous, so let me back up here for this checklist. Oftentimes buyers agents will run a market analysis on a property. As the market begins to slow, that's probably more important than ever to do that. And like I said, 50% of my business is with buyers. I don't too often do it. But in the beginning, I think it's really important to do, because you don't want to get your buyers to get into a house that's overpriced and that sort of things, particularly if we think the market's going to shift much. I personally don't think we're going to see it fall off the ledge a lot. There's a lot of buyers out there. There's a lot of people that are cash buyers, and the ones that are the most hurt by it are first-time home buyers that don't quite have enough cash to make their the percentage of interest does sometimes push them out of the range that they wanted to be in. And so sometimes that just means that they have to buy a house that's further out of town that sells for less money and that sort of thing. So it's not an end all be all just because the interest rate has gone up. My first house, I think I paid 11.25%. So, these rates have been so ridiculously low that no one ever, in my, experience, had, we never thought that we'd ever see rates that have been as low as we've had. But all that being said, CMAs are good to do. And it's also having the experience of running through and doing CMAs, no matter what it is, it gives you talking points in it, and you can do some comparisons for them, that you can look at a house and, well, this house sold for 20,000 more, but it had granite countertops, whereas this one has Formica, little details like that can reassure them. Now, but on this checklist for preparing an offer, the number one thing says obtain a buyer's pre-approval letter from their lender. I had a situation where I had an out-of-town buyer, and Tony or someone there had mentioned that they had an out-of-town buyer. And I actually, this year, I've had more out-of-town buyers And they've just found me through social media or I don't know how they find me. Actually, they'll say they found me on, just doing a search, but I don't know how they really have found me. They were sort of vague on it, but I have represented several people from out of town this year. This one particular buyer, she gave me a $350,000 pre-approval letter from a lender. She and one of her children drove up from the Bay Area, and we went into contract on a property that she liked, and we went in at 320, I believe it was. So we're starting through the process, and so I hooked her up with Keller Mortgage because she wanted to save. She was only going to put 5% down. And I said, look, if you go through Keller Mortgage, you don't have the closing costs of the origination fee, the underwriting fee, the processing fee, and they give you $1,000 at closing, which offsets the cost of your appraisal. So on this house, you're going to save in excess of $5,000. So I said, I'd really like to see you get a pre-approval also from, we can submit this other letter that you have, but we can, but while we're waiting for that to go through, we can research out other lenders. It's just that if you do change the lender, then you have to get permission from the seller for a different lender. And that's usually not a problem, but you do have to handle those things by addendum. So don't ever assume that your buyers can change lenders without notifying the seller. So that happened on one of the very first listings that or buyers that I represented. They didn't tell me, and they switched from, I don't know who it was, Wells Fargo to somebody else. And so anyway, but Keller Williams Keller Mortgage has their own underwriting department. This other lender was from the Bay Area, clearly did not, and most lenders don't have their own underwriting or own in-house underwriting department. This particular buyer had a $220,000 IRS lien, and it didn't show up until underwriting discovered it. And the IRS lien, they don't show up. And I don't know if this is 100%, so don't quote me on this, but what I had to hook her up with a different mortgage company here in town because Keller Mortgage said, we can't touch this. Her debt to income ratio is way too out of balance, where she owes this $220,000 to the IRS. And so it was Keller Mortgage that told me that liens by the IRS, if you're buying a piece of property out of the county in which the lien was issued to this person, it doesn't show up as indebtedness, but somehow it showed up when underwriting got it. So Keller Mortgage said, no can do. So then I tried a second person here in town. They said, no can do. That is, she doesn't have this set up with a payment program for the IRS, blah, blah, blah. And so we still are not in contract, and we had to get out of that other contract that we had written. And so these pre-approval letters, I would, from now on, and this is just me, but from now on, when I get a pre-approval letter, I just come right out and ask my buyer. Now, and I explained to them that I had a bad experience with this, but I'm going to ask you a question because this doesn't often show up for indebtedness on pre-approval letters. But do you owe the IRS any? Is there any IRS liens on your credit? Because it just saves you a step, but that's entirely up to you. And you may not feel comfortable doing it at this point in your agent career, and I would totally understand that. But I'm just saying to you that not all pre-approvals are the end all be all to getting that your client is viable. It's more viable if they have the pre-approval letter and $150,000 as their down payment. And then you know that there's probably not a problem. Review the tax records for information about pricing history. And sometimes these tax records can be pretty revealing on properties. Sometimes the property may be on 2 tax lots, but the listing agent only showed 1. So sometimes it's pretty important to pull those things up before you write the offer, and go to RLID and do that, to search the property that way. Ensure the property is still available before spending any time writing an offer. So that's not only checking the RMLS, but I would say communicate with the listing agent. When speaking with the listing agent, build report. Okay, we talked about that. And this is really critical to writing a good offer. Ask questions of the listing agent to discover what's important to the seller. The very first contract that I wrote as a buyer's agent, and it was my second transaction. My first transaction was a listing. My second was a buyer that came from an open house that I had on that first listing. This particular seller, I can't remember what it was. We wrote an escalation clause, but there were 2 things that we offered that seller that they wanted. I think it was a young couple that had children and everything, and it had to do with them about the date for them to move out. And this property was being bought for 2 sisters were looking at the property, but they were buying it for their parents that lived in Nevada. So these sellers wanted more time to get out. And so we could offer that because the parents weren't going to move for like 6 to 8 weeks. So that it cost us nothing to do that. We let them occupy after closing, which is a separate addendum, but we let them, we wrote in there to offer to let them stay. And I just put it in an email that we would allow them to occupy after close. But those are the kind of things that really make a big difference in getting your offer accepted, because some of these sellers have some real crunch time situations, especially if they're having some work done to a new property, or if it's just logistics getting from one state to another. But anyway, that time of occupation is really critical to a lot of the sellers. And certainly asking about the activity on the property. So, and what we've been doing in the past year and a half is we would just call and ask them, or they'll text. Sometimes agents would text how many offers do you have, and then you could say 4 in hand or whatever. But even in this kind of market, I would still ask the question, because you can't assume that it's a dead property and not getting that much activity. The seller's disclosure statements. I work with Angela Armstrong there in our Keller Williams office as my transaction coordinator. I try not to do any of the paperwork myself, but I do have to know how to do it, like how to go into DocuSign and create an offer on the weekends when she's not available. But when she does my listings, when you get a listing, print off this seller's disclosure statement and have them fill that out right away, so that when you go active on that property, that you can load that up to the RMLS, and that and particularly if it has any defects that you're going to call out and acknowledge, like maybe there's a leaky roof or something, or if there's some septic issues or whatever it may be, load that up right away on your property, so that it just saves a step for those buyers agents that are going to be looking at your property. And you can just look on the listing and go down and just look and see if there's any documents. And I'll tell you, this is kind of off topic, but one of the things that I do for properties, particularly if there's not enough, in our description that we have to our public remarks, sometimes you have a property that has more information that you need to write about the property than you could possibly get in those public remarks. So I create what I call a features list. And for example, in June, I sold a property that was a commercial property, and it had been owned by the seller for 34 years. And it was 5,000 square feet. It was a 1927 craftsman style home. It was a vintage house. Upstairs were 2 apartments, both had small kitchens and full-size bedrooms. They had a separate entrance. It had a 1,500 square foot unfinished basement, but all of the renters had access to the laundry room in the basement. So the basement had an outside entrance as well. And then the main floor had 4 hair salons. And so I went through all of the details of describing the different features of each level. So it had 3 levels to this home. And in addition to that, because you can have 5 documents that you load up on a listing, I also created for this seller a profit and loss statement, of which she had never done for herself. But because this was an income producing property, I had to explain where the money was coming from. So, you know, how much of it was apartment rental and what were the expenses for the apartment? And likewise, how much income was coming in for the 4 salons? Well, the seller occupied 1 salon, so she didn't pay herself rent. So all of that was reflective and had to be explained, but I couldn't explain that in those public remarks. So just know that you can do that, and that check for any kind of extra documents that might be on a listing that would help you out. Okay, any questions on that part?
So you can get a seller's disclosure before you make an offer?
Yeah, so yeah, because if they're set up on the, most agents, I would say it's 50% or less of the agents that actually put that seller's disclosure on an active listing, but I would say about half of the agents do. So it's there for you to look at when you even show the property.
That's
So
nice.
what I would do as once they express an interest, and lots of times the buyers will come to you with a property and say, I want to look at this property. Well, then you can pull it up, look to see if there's a seller's disclosure there, and then it will point out any defects. I wouldn't necessarily tell the buyer the defects until you went and looked at the house. And then while I was there, then I would either pull that out later. If it doesn't have any problems that are notable, then I wouldn't, there's no reason to take that document with you. But if there is something, then you might want to have that with you so that you could then address that when you're there on the property. Now, and I don't know if anybody has said this to you in any of the classes that you've had so far. I tell my buyers when I take them in a property not to discuss things that they do not like about the property when they're inside the house, because you just have to assume that you're being either videotaped or that they have cameras or recorders going. You simply today just don't know how many of them are. If I have a property that does have a video camera, I put it in the private remarks to the agents. And I had one seller, it was so obvious that it had a camera in right when you walked in the front door and one in the dining room. And people would still stand at the breakfast bar and talk about the property. And every time that somebody looked at the house, the seller would call me and tell me what those buyers and their buyers' agents.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So word of caution, because if you say something negative and this is the dream house for your buyer, and they've just said something, well, I don't like this carpeting, it looks like crap. And then the seller was like, I like that carpeting. But in that example that I gave you, this seller said to me, there was this 2 or 3 guys that came through together, and he called me up and he goes, look, I've been around that type of person all my life. No matter what his offer is, we're not accepting it.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And they gave us a real low ball offer, so it wasn't hard to reject it. But yeah, so I just tell them that we have to have, and I just do, like, especially if I'm selling them 2 or 3 properties, then I say, let's just go regroup, let's go to Starbucks, or let's go to, some Mucho Gusto or someplace where you can sit outside and don't even necessarily have to order unless you want to. But go to some neutral place that you can then kind of revisit these properties. Because that, and take notes. And whenever I show a property, this is kind of getting into showing homes and rather than making offers, but I print off the client full list every single time. And if I'm showing them multiple properties, I give that client full to the buyers. But if I'm showing them multiple properties, I put it on a clipboard and I give them a pen. And I say, make any notes that you want about this property on this. And if I have multiple houses, like one time I showed I sold a house in Portland for I represent the buyer, but her purchase was $1.3 million. So we looked at $15 million plus houses in Portland over a Saturday and a Sunday. And it was extremely difficult to keep those things straight. But because I had not only a spreadsheet with the description, like how many bedrooms, what's the price, you know, blah, 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 I also had a client full report for each one of them. And it was extremely helpful in being able to remember each particular house. So, but you have to have an ability to go and regroup before you know, even if they want to make an offer, you've got to go and, you know, I try to pick a location where a lot of people can't overhear what you're talking about too, because for all you know, you could be in a public place and the seller could be having coffee, trying to kill time while you know, waiting to get back into their own house. And they could be sitting next door to you. So you have to be kind of careful where you take them. Taking them to the office is always a good choice too. But
so my other question was, so if you're the listing agent, you can kind of demand that the disclosure is done before it goes live.
Well, you give it to yourself. Yeah. You just
we didn't get ours till like halfway through.
I think that's part of the compliance, that disclosure agreement that they have to sign.
Yeah, it didn't used to be. I think you just have a matter of days now that you have to have that submitted. Before, sometimes you'd be halfway through the closing process 2 weeks after you had listed and everything, before the sellers had filled it out. I'll tell you what I do, honestly. I take it when I have the listing agreement. If they sign the listing agreement through DocuSign, then I still make an appointment for them either that night or the very next day. And I go and meet with them and we go over that seller's disclosure, because every single box has to be checked off.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't, then Tom won't accept it if it doesn't have every single box. So even if it's a NA, you have to check the box. So I'm there and go through that with the sellers. You can't answer it for them, but oftentimes I've had a lot, like this past year, I've had a lot of 80-year-old plus sellers. And so I just read it to them and then I mark the box and then they sign the pages.
So that could be a red flag if you're showing to, homes that don't have the disclosure done yet.
Well, I would probably not go that far.
Okay.
I would, because honestly, it's only been recently, and I think probably since January or less, that they've now made it so that it's only a few days that we have of grace period to get it signed. So there's going to be a lot of agents that, and I don't know if that's just in-house or if it's a state requirement. But it is something new because we before had plenty of time. As a matter of fact, I didn't start out submitting those with my paperwork at all, even in my first transaction. So yeah, it hasn't been that. We always knew that we had to do it, but we didn't know there was a time frame. So it's better to get as much paperwork out of the way as you can. And that's a really important one to do. Okay, so I am on writing the offer. So let's see, where are we? Okay, this is still writing office. Okay, it says, here's some guidelines. Ensure your buyer knows that all checks, so that's their earnest money and everything, are written at the same time the offer is written and deposited upon acceptance. I don't do that. Because at this point, so many times we're not, the last year and a half, our offers haven't been accepted. So I don't have them write it. Because you might have them write a earnest money to Cascade Title, and then before you know it, it's a different dollar amount and you're writing one to Western Title. So I don't have them do that. They have 3 days to get that into the title company, 3 days past the day of acceptance. So I put that on the sellers. That's their responsibility to do that. And I just remind them. So what I like to do is to prepare an email once you've had, well, I do this when once the offer is accepted, then I send to the listing agent and to my buyers, I send them a little calendar. So it has, I just put earnest money due by, whatever the date is. And then I just put all the deadlines. Inspection has to be completed by, the 10 days or 15, whatever you've specified. So I put it in there when we have to have the inspection completed by. And, then I tell them, when the closing date is. And so anything that's a date, there's 4 or 5 dates that are important. So I put that in an email to the buyers, and I also put it in an email to the listing agent so that we're both on the same page. But that's once you've got your offer accepted. Okay, so this is bring your laptop or tablet with you when you meet with the client to review the offer and respond online. If the seller's out of the area, you may still report the offer using eEdge and talk them through it by phone. And I usually just talk it through by phone. A lot of mine, when I'm dealing with the 80-year-old plus, most of them have some computer skills, but they would rather you just tell them. So it just depends on your client. You'll figure that out as you go along. But okay, when your buyer makes an offer, they are essentially selling themselves to the homeowner. A cover letter makes your client's offer stand out and serves the purpose of the following. It summarizes the offer and it humanizes the offer. There's been a lawsuit in the state of Oregon concerning love letters, and love letters were something where the potential buyer would write a letter to the sellers and tell them who they are and how many kids they have and what they do for a living and about how much they want the house. And so there was a lot of discomfort for agents because they felt as though it was somewhat discriminatory, or people could be discriminated upon, and that it was creating some sort of discrimination. So right now, they outlawed them, and then now some judge overturned it, so it's out there and you can still write those letters. I quit doing them several years ago. I did it in the beginning and to present my clients. So what I do is I don't let my clients do it. I prepare a cover letter with my offer and I tell them a little bit about my clients, but your obligation is to express how they, their love for the house, not so much about themselves. But I still give them a little bit of data. I might say that this is a couple that's moving in from out of state. They have grandchildren that live in the neighborhood. And so they're really excited to be able to entertain their kids in this, wonderful dining room, blah, blah, blah. Or if it has a great yard and, play with their kids or whatever. So I do that, and I keep it as, I don't write them a novel. I keep it pretty clear, clean and concise. But then I do put all of these check marks down in the body, and I bullet it in the body of my email to them. So I'll bullet the offering price. If it has an escalation clause in it, I put that on a separate line, that will best the offer by $2,000 up to a maximum of whatever the price is that you've set. Then I put when the deadline is, I put how much they'll be putting down as a total down payment. Also, I put down how much they're putting down for the earnest money. And the earnest money becomes important because let's just say that somebody was buying a $500,000 house and they were only putting down $1,000 in earnest money. They could go all the way up to, 30, 45 days into this transaction and then change their mind, and they would lose their earnest money, but they're only losing $1,000. That $1,000 goes back to the seller, but that's not very much money for the seller to have had their property off the market for 30, 45 days. And the rule of thumb is 1%. So on a $500,000 house, it should be $5,000 that they're putting down. But you will have some of these offers that come through with a pretty small earnest money. And so you want to kind of look at that too, because sometimes that's a signal of you just like to have it to be at least 1% of the purchase price. I'm going into my 7th year now of selling real estate, and I had my first transaction that fell out. I'd not had one that had been in contract that had fallen out until this summer, and it was on a manufactured home in a park. And they had put $2,000 down, and they'd paid $500 to have a home inspection. And the night before, they decided that the place was too small and they wanted out. And they were cash buyers, and they had already presented their check to the escrow company. So they lost the $2,000 earnest money. It went to the seller. And then of course they were out the $500 for the home inspection. So we turned around and relisted, and I actually raised the price on that property and got a little bit more money. So he actually came out ahead by about, it was listed for like 165 or something. I think I ended up selling it for 175, plus he had the 2,000 that he had gained from the earnest money that he got on the other person. But anyway, just know that earnest money does make a difference. Okay, so when I have an offer, like for example, once I've shown this house, my buyer says, I want to write an offer. The minute that those words come off the lips of my buyers, I call that agent and I say, I'm going back to my office. I'm going to write an offer. My clients loved it. And presumably you'd already talked to this agent and know that there's either one offer already or that there's no offers. So then what you need to ask is ask them for a deadline for when they want that. If it's a new listing, if it's been on the market for a while, you don't have to ask the question on when they want a deadline. You just set it. And but what you should do is ask them, and I said this earlier, is ask if it's been on the market for a while, then just ask them how soon their seller can respond. And then I set my my expiration a couple hours after that time period, because there's no reason to make your buyers wait any longer than they have to. And secondly, you don't want somebody else to sneak in there and buy it. And I have to tell you that you cannot make assumptions about when a property will sell and not sell, and that you won't get competition. I had a multi-generational family. We started looking last October or November. We made multiple offers on probably half a dozen different properties. And I kept coming back to him and I said, that house down in Cottage Grove is still for sale. It's the cheapest house per square footage in Lane County. And yes, it needs some work. It needed new flooring. It had ugly old carpet in it, and it needed to be painted. And but for them, it was a perfect house. It had lots of space and everything. So their reluctance was that the grandmother didn't want to live in Cottage Grove because all of her friends were here in Eugene. But we just couldn't, and the daughter had to get out of her apartment or her house that she was renting by March. So we were up against the wall for a deadline. So finally, and this house had been on the market at 480, had been on the market for 4 or 5 months. So they were offering a $5,000 carpet allowance. So I called the agent and I said, hey, look, I've shown this house now 3 times to these buyers. They're finally going to make an offer on this property. So I see you've got a $5,000 carpet allowance. What if we just write this for $475? And then we're not going to ask for that $5,000. We'll just take it off this offer because it's all the same thing. The difference is that the agent makes a little bit less money, but we're not talking very much. But it's cleaner that way. So I said, well, will your seller accept my offer if I write it for $475 and we're not going to ask for any carpet allowance? He said yes. So I go back. We're in the process of writing the offer. And the agent calls me up. He says, hey, I just got a call. I've got another offer coming in. Now, what's the chances? It's been on the market for 4 or 5 months already. We had to actually write an escalation clause, and we ended up paying about $14,000 or $15,000 more than if we'd have bought it earlier when there was no competition. And I've had that happen to me twice now on different properties where they've been listed on the market for a while. And the minute that we decided to make an offer, another offer came in. So you can't assume that you can buy it for cheap or get your offer accepted. So real estate is a fascinating and can be frustrating business at the same time. And so I like to just keep my buyers and everybody always be optimistic and don't be pessimistic, but always be optimistic about what our chances are, and just know that anything can happen. Okay, this is a checklist for writing it: price and terms, seller disclosure, conveyances, earnest money. I think we've covered pretty much the time for the seller acceptance, financing terms, the pre-approval letter, and loan approval, all that. Okay, now the other thing that when they're talking about loan approval and all of that, all of us have certain weaknesses within our business and things that we do and don't do that maybe we should. And one of them is that I've never been, as a listing agent, I've never spent a lot of time talking to the loan officer of the buyers. And yet there's been times when I probably should have and got some more information, knowing what was going on. But when you have a listing, it's not a bad idea to once a week check in with those loan officers just to make sure that everything is still on time and that everything is moving along. So that's just something that a lot of people don't tell you about, and I've had to learn it the hard way that it's a good, very smart thing to do. Okay, closing date, make sure the closing date will work for your buyer, their lender, the closing company, all of that. And most of the time, depending on what your buyers want, but I often write, well, and again, what the sellers want. So you have to kind of work both of those before you have to have the answer to both of those before you write your offer. Home warranties, at times, like that property that I sold that was $1.3 million where I represented the buyer, I did pay for her home warranty, and I had the home warranty company paid out of my commission, so I never had to handle that payment, and I just got less commission on it. And it was probably because I bought her a super duper one, so it was probably $600 for that. But it was well worth it, and I was really glad that I did. I don't do it on all properties. Repair limits, focus on the items the buyer is most interested in repairing. And as you go along, you'll kind of figure this out, but things that are the most important, there are things that they have to do, like the earthquake straps and the smoke detectors. And I would say to you that when you go and preview a property that you're going to list, point that out. If they don't have those earthquake straps on, that has to be done right away. And I even went to Costco the other day. They had smoke alarms with the CO monitor, had those on sale, a 2-pack for like $39. And normally they'd been about $50 a piece per smoke detector CO monitor. So it was a really good price at Costco. So I bought 2 packages of them. And that little house that I had down in Camas Valley, even though that thing was a total gut job, nobody could live in it in the condition that it was in. The agent had written that they wanted a smoke detector in there. The house wasn't even locked up. So I said to the agent, look, I'll leave a smoke detector set at my front desk and you can pick it up anytime, because I'm not going to drive it down, because it takes me an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half to drive down there. And I said, I'm not going to go hang these in that property that it doesn't even have a locked door and the windows are broken out. So it's kind of foolish, but having one of those sets on hand isn't bad. If you wanted, you could always gift it to your buyer, or you could get them to just repay you for it if necessary. But those do have to be put up, and just read all the details, because it depends on how many bedrooms you have and all of that. So, but that's something that has to be done. That's a requirement. That is not a kind of sort of maybe. Those sellers have to do that. But when it comes to repairs in this really tight market, I would often said to the listing agents, I'm having an inspection for the benefit of my client. And unless we have foundation issues or roof issues or something that's pretty major, we won't be asking for repairs. So, and, you know, back when I first started, people would ask for everything. If there was a broken seal in a window, they would ask. Well, sometimes those windows now are $700-800 a piece, and it can take a couple of months to get them. So that's a really hard ask to get a seller to cop for that anymore. Broken windows, you could probably get that done. But some of the things, you're not buying a new house, so you have to expect that there's some wear and tear. Dry rot issues, usually pretty easy to get a seller to do that, unless they're saying that they're selling it as is. But I sold one property that was as is, and turned out that when the inspector came in, it had all kinds of electrical issues. So the seller did have to repair those, even though they'd sold it as is. Special clauses or contingencies. These need to be met in order to close. So like 4 or 5 days before the close, you want to just go through your checklist and make sure that everything is done, and that make sure that all of the repairs have been done. And lots of times a listing agent will send the buyer's agent photographs of the repairs that have been done, but it's really good to get a paid receipt. But if the seller is doing the repairs themselves, sometimes you just have to accept the photo of it being done. Okay, buyer offer objections. Okay, so these are scripts. I highly recommend that you go through and read scripts. And, you know, scripts are funny. You think of it as feeling like it's a rehearsed presentation, but believe me, when you get out there in the moment, you will remember a script that you've read and practiced a few times. And I would say practice out loud. I was in Toastmasters for 10 years and did a lot of public speaking. And so I was used to practicing all of my speeches out loud. So this sort of comes second nature to me, but I'm telling you, it will be well worth your time. So objections are always, they're out there and you're going to get them. And the more experience you have, it'll be easier for you to say, no, that won't work. And this is why. And so sometimes I I have a tendency to cut them off at the knees when they come up with some ridiculous thing that they want to ask for when we have a competitive market. But you know, sometimes you have to, it depends on the rapport that you have with your buyers and that sort of thing. But you have to learn and develop your own skills in doing that. So, but just those scripts will help you out a lot. Okay, presenting the offer to the listing agent, call the agent immediately. Use eEdge. I don't use eEdge. I've never used eEdge, but okay. And Angela does all of my stuff for entering all the steps in Command for me that goes through the process. And just for FYI, her fee per transaction is like $300 to $350. They take it out of your commission when you're paid. So, and then if she writes an offer for me and it goes nowhere, I don't have to pay her. So it's been a really good thing to be able to have clean offers presented to people without mistakes and things like that. So I've used her right from the get-go.
Mara said we have to do the first couple by ourselves. Well, not by ourselves, but we can't use her for the first couple transactions.
Yeah, but that's because you have Mara to check it over.
Right, totally. But she wants us to go through everything too and make sure we know what steps are there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, because even if you did use Angela, she's not available on the weekends, and so you still have to know how to do it.
Yeah.
The other thing that I have done too is that I will, when I sit down to present one, and if I have any hesitation if I'm doing it right or wrong, I print off another offer that I may have had, the most recent that I've had, whether it was a buyer or a seller representation. I print it off so that I have it in front of me. And then I kind of, you know, and if one isn't enough, then I go and look for another one. And so that's helped me more times than not, so that I just don't miss something, or I know how to write it. Okay, when your buyer's offer is countered and your buyer wants to recounter, it's important to have a proper perspective. And so you can read what they say with that, but every situation is going to be different, and it's going to be just kind of hard trying to figure out where we're at right now. So for the most part, I think that sellers are, even if they have to take less than what they've listed at, sellers know that it's a changing market to some degree. We still don't have a ton of listings out there. So just so that you know, June of last year, we had nationwide 240,000, they refer to it as units, but 240,000 houses on the market nationwide. June of this year, we had 340,000. And in order for it to become a buyer's market, we have to have nationwide 1.2 million houses on the market. So we're a long way from it being a buyer's market, but that doesn't mean that regionally we can't have some softness in our market. So representing the seller. Does someone have a question?
Good, Tom. How are you? Good.
Okay, so so when you're representing this, receive the offer, gather the information to your client, and then respond. So some of these, you know, you will have the information because you've talked to their agent beforehand. And so I don't know how beneficial all of this, like how did they come up with their offer? You know, I suppose that ask the buyer agent these questions. I see. Okay. Well, most of the time, the buyer's agent is going to tell you why they've offered a certain price. So all of these are good. You know, if they're moving from out of town, why are they moving to the area? Is it for job, for family? Whatever. Okay, so all of those are good. checklist for reviewing an offer. Okay, so be sure that the address is for the correct house. That would be pretty good. Okay, price, earnest money, time for acceptance. Yeah, so that's one of the first things that I do when I scroll through it first to see what the offer looks like. And then I print it off immediately. I get out my highlighter and I highlight all of the things that are important. So I highlight the earnest money, I highlight the amount that they're paying. I look for that additional provisions to see if they've added an escalation clause. If the agent hasn't told me that that their offer included one. I look for that pre-approval letter. Look for the date on that pre-approval letter, because most of them are only good for 30 days. Some of them, if they have a really good, strong client, will give them for 6 months. But I definitely check out the date. Terms, closing date. Yeah, make sure that works for your seller. But most of the time, like if you know that your seller wants to have a quick close, I put those kind of remarks in my private remarks to the agents. So that just kind of saves some of the steps and some of the questions that a buyer's agent might have. So I try to do as much as I can to save people time, not only save myself time from taking repeated questions, but also so that the agents can cut down the amount of calls that they have to make back and forth to their own buyers. Review requested repairs. And oftentimes when you got when you're reviewing an offer, you're not going to have requested repairs until they have an inspection. So I'm not quite sure why that would be there. HOAs, very important to have those HOAs and to know what the amount is. And I personally, based on just some experiences that I've had, I would call the HOA and just make sure that that price that they've been quoted in that documentation is accurate, because sometimes, especially when you're selling manufactured homes and parks, sometimes they have grandfathered prices that the seller may be enjoying, but the new buyer will not. So just all little things that you learn. And I would make certain that my buyers, because they get really confused about their closing date and their possession date. And most all of my transactions have been, I would say 85% of them have been, or 90% even, have been whatever day I close on, that's when they can have possession by 5 p.m. that night. Or if I get the call at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and it says you've been funded and recorded, if it's in the contract, in the offer, which most of them are, that it's 5 p.m. on closing, most of the time a listing agent will let you in early if it's funded and closed. So, and that's something for a buyer's agent to talk to that listing agent about how and when you're going to get the keys to the property. So oftentimes they'll leave it in the lockbox and not take the lockbox down till the next day, so that you can just go there and let your client in. That's what I do when I'm the listing agent. And then I just go collect the lockbox the next morning or something, so that, because it's amazing how many times you might need back into that property at the last minute. So, yeah, so just, but your clients, you're gonna have to repeat things, closing dates and possession dates. Sometimes they're the same. And even for the sellers, they get confused. I have this one client right now, and I've sold 3 properties for them, and they still don't, they still get confused as to when they don't own the property anymore. So it's like, well, when the money hits your bank account, for starters. But anyway, it's always pretty funny. Okay, presenting offers to your client. So I'm just looking through this. So it says, first, call your client to let them know you have an offer to present. Present the offer to your client. I see. Okay. And I would say the third bulleted item on this thing about the tone of the conversation, never criticize the buyer, their agent, or their offer. And I try to zip my lips about anything negative. I may have had a terrible time with a buyer's agent on a particular listing that I've had, or conversely on a listing agent when I was a buyer's agent. And I just do not muddy the water. They don't need to know the struggles that I've had and to let anything negatively impact a contract, because you never know when it can come back to bite you. And they may be teetering on the fence about changing their mind or something. And so really just zip it, complain to a fellow agent if you want to vent on something that's going on. And you'll find your people within the company that you feel comfortable just going to lunch and saying, I've had this. And because as a solo agent, you're just talking to me, myself, and I sometimes, and it really is helpful to be able to have regular scheduled lunches with people that you that has maybe started at the same time. I have 3 other agents that we did orientation together, and we still get together 3 or 4 times a year for lunch, and we do it at each other's houses. Sometimes we go for Mexican food, but it's been incredibly beneficial and very supporting of each other to do that. So I highly recommend that, so that you don't get burned out or you don't get too frustrated, and that you can just learn from each other and be a good support to each other. Your turn presenting offers. Okay, this is a good script material. Presenting a low offer to your seller. They say here, never criticize or show a negative attitude about a low offer. Well, sometimes that's pretty dang hard to do. For example, that little Valley property that I had, we were listing at 129, and the first offer was 60,000. And the second, and these were just verbal, and the third offer was 80,000. We're like, no, no can do. So all of these are these scripts. Those are all really good just to read at your own, on your own time. Don't skip that process, because it's just going to it'll work for you in the long run to have just a little bit of repertoire on how to say things, because it's very easy to get sidelined because you're new and think that that people aren't going to have their trust in you or think that you know what you're talking about. And it's interesting. Before I went into selling real estate, I had a 30-year career as a wholesale lumber broker. So I bought and sold lumber nationwide, but pretty much I-5 corridor from Seattle to San Diego and over into Arizona a little bit. But I did a tremendous amount of buying. And so that was just negotiating all day long. And little did I know how much that was going to benefit me in working in real estate. But and there was a reason I was going to tell you that, and now I can't remember why. So I'll just move on to my notes here.
I think you were talking about not feeling like your client's not going to know what you're talking about, being new.
Yes, exactly. And now I know what I was going to say. Thank you for that. The first
I do it all the time.
Well, what happens too is you look down the piece of paper that's your next script or your next page in here, and then it totally messes with you.
Oh yeah, I get it.
The first listing that I had earlier, I was telling you that I work with Trenda at her marketing and designs company to do these monthly mailings. Well, every August, you can order football magnets to send out. And so on the football magnet, I do both OSU and U of O. And then you have kind of your little business card at the bottom of these, and they're just refrigerator magnets. I don't know, I think they're maybe 50 cents per magnet to purchase. And so I was taking my first Ignite class, and the guy that was teaching it, we had to come to to our class, and we had to show them that we were making these calls per day, and that we were making progress. And at the time, my mother-in-law was, well, she was my ex-mother-in-law at that point. My ex-husband had moved to Arizona, and I used to laugh and tell people that I got divorced, but I got custody of his mother. And so she was in the last couple of months of her life when I got my real estate license. And so we had moved her out of her home and moved her into Solvang. And so I would go over there every night, and we had somebody that would stay with her during the day, but I had to go over at 4 o'clock every day, and I'd spend the night there with her. And so she would get like a second wind at 10 o'clock at night. So she was keeping me up all night long, and I was exhausted. And I had no idea how in the world I was ever going to do real estate. But I was still doing all of my Ignite classes, but I couldn't keep up on making the 20 calls a day and doing everything that I had to do. And so one day, the instructor, he says, Linda, just do something. And so I was already, I had already done postcard mailers that I'd sent out to this couple hundred of my sphere. And I sent out an announcement card that I was working at Keller Williams now as a real estate agent. So that was my first mailing. And that probably went out in July. And then in August, I had ordered the football magnets, but I didn't really have time to, I hadn't put together my database list. So that was my first project when he says, just do something. So I spent the next few days getting mailing addresses and everything, mailed out the magnet. And then the next month I did a postcard in September, October, November, and come December, I get a telephone call. And this guy says, hey, Linda, I'm looking at your football magnet. He says, I still have it up on the refrigerator. And he said, I want to sell the house. Well, I had known his wife for like 30 years through my lumber career. And I'd met him once or twice, but I wouldn't have recognized him had I seen him in the grocery store. I would have had no idea who he was. So he says, I want you to come over and tell me what I need to do to get the house ready to sell. And I said, okay, so what works for you? And I said, I can come tomorrow night if that works. And he goes, sure, that works perfect. So I went over. We had a great presentation. And long story short, when I'm just talking to you about doing things and not knowing what you're doing, the guy never once asked me, how many houses have you listed or how many transactions have you started? He knew I was new, and yet he never asked me a thing. We sold we set the price, and I went over and I showed him the comps on my laptop, and we looked at all the others. I let him select the price, and we had a 2-day open house that really was, had lots of people that came through. But we only got one offer, and it was a full price offer. So of course we took it. But all that to say that I followed the plan. I did what, everything that I had learned in Ignite. I did everything that they had told me. I did all of the CMA stuff. I practiced the stuff that I was supposed to, because in the meantime, my mother-in-law passed away a couple of months into me being an agent. So then I was finally able to get some rest and get back into the groove where I felt like I wasn't, talking in a foreign language. But people don't know that you're new unless you offer that, this is the first time I've done such and such. And in the beginning, I never said that I hadn't done something. Today, when I encounter something new, I'll say something like, geez, in 7 years, this is the first time I've run into this. And so then, because if it is something new and I don't know exactly how to work my way through it, now I don't mind saying I don't know something. But in the beginning, I never said to them, I didn't know. I said, great question. Let me go check with my coach and I'll get back to you. And I said, I'll get the answer with, 24 hours or less. And So I just handled it that way. But because I had taken, I mean, I didn't miss a class. I didn't miss a all partners meeting. I just did everything. And at that time we were having lots of training classes in Portland, and you know, you'd have to pay like $100 or $120 to go listen to an all-day presentation. But I just felt like if I just learned one little thing that made me a better agent or made me sound better, I was okay with that. So, okay. Work the offer. Okay. Huh. It's interesting that they don't really tell you how to work the offer. Take them from presenting the offer to a buyer as a seller's agent. Okay. Because there's a training class through OAR, and I think it's called, it's a pricing, like a pricing specialist. I have my senior real estate, God, I can't even think of it. Senior accredited real estate specialist designation and also an accredited buyer's designation. I haven't taken the training and got the one for the pricing specialist. It's just one of those things that you can take it and pay for it, and then you get like about 12 hours or 12 hours towards your continuing ed. And but then I have it printed on all of my, like my signature block, on my business cards and that sort of thing. But I have really, those things actually, you pay to take that class, but there's also an annual fee that you pay, and usually it's $100 a year to be able to claim that, to still have that title. So, but in taking the accredited buyer's designation, it was then that I learned about actually shopping the buyer. And let me give you my email address. If you want the notes that I took, I had that instructor send it to me, but it talks about shopping the buyer. And that's kind of what I was trying to explain to you when I was talking about the cash buyer that I had at 440 and then I got the 3 offers over 500,000, and I just told her what it is, because there's a lot of agents that will not tell you what it is, and it doesn't have to be that way. So they do that by choice. So anyway, my email address is Linda, Linda, .reed, REED, @kw.com. And my cell phone number is 541-953-3011. And if you want, I could send you that. Just send me an email, whatever it is that you want. But I could send you the spreadsheet that I developed on Excel for when I am going like on an all day showing houses to people. I can give you that kind of spreadsheet. That's been very helpful. And if I can think of anything else that I have that I've created myself, I can send that to you. But that spreadsheet's real helpful. But also when it comes to negotiating, I really like that shopping the buyer. Okay. So let's go on. So it says set the stage for positive negotiation. So it says whether you represent the buyer or the seller, the goal is the same: to kick off the negotiation that in a process that's positive, efficient, ultimately leads to a win-win. Oh, and this is one thing that I do. I do not send out one email at the end to all of the people that wrote me an offer. Let's just say I have 8 offers. I will personally call each one of those agents to let them know that they did not, that we accepted a different offer. And only after I've talked to all of them do I click the offer that it's gone pending. And then I send out another email send out an email to them and just thank them. Well, I send out if I get the sellers to sign the rejected offer, sometimes I just let them expire and I don't send them back having had the seller sign them all, especially when I have some of these clients that are like in their 80s and 90s. I don't put them through that if they're not computer savvy, because then I have to go over and go through each page with them and have them initial it and all that. And some of them literally, they just get fatigued with it. So I don't, some of them, I just let those offers expire. So if I'm not going to send back a rejected offer, then I just send back, after I have talked to everybody, then I just send out a quick email and just thanking them for showing the house and presenting us with a nice offer, and that I hope to work with them again or at a later time in the future. It is so frustrating if you're representing a buyer and all of a sudden a ping goes off on your buyer's cell phone because they followed a property and they know that that property's gone pending before you do as their agent. So I do not want to put any of the buyer's agents in that spot. So I work really hard at calling the people and having a conversation with them if they want about why we didn't accept their offer. And sometimes it's has to do with terms, that they waived the inspections. For example, that Camas Valley property that I had, the first offer that I got that wanted to know what price will you take to take this off. They actually, because the other offer came in a little bit more, they came back and offered to pay me even more than what the buyer had offered. And when I looked at their offer, I went back to her, called her up, and I said, are your buyers willing to forego the repairs? Because you've got this on here about the well, and that within 5 days, if the well flow isn't what it, isn't a good readout on it, then you would want out of this contract. And so she called me back and said, no, the buyers don't want to remove those contingencies. Well, the other guy, he wasn't going to ask for anything. So in that case, that could have been worth as much as $20,000, because if those wells are dry, we don't know what it costs to drill a well, but we've been told that it could be as much as $20,000. And it could be that if they did run it dry, that it has come back to some degree. We don't know. And we weren't going to hire somebody to go look it over. But that was a big difference in the sale price was the same, but the net result was going to be vastly different. So, but I have those conversations with people, and sometimes you can't do it. It can only be through text. They might be traveling, and like if they're going traveling to Bend, they're kind of sketchy with cell phone service and stuff like that. All of that, you just do what you can. And if you can't reach them by phone, then you do have to email them. So, you just do what you can. But I have really good rapport with the other agents, and I treat them like I want to be treated, and it's worked out really well for me. And so let's see. So, okay, so this is just our, whoops. We used to recite these at all partners, which was kind of fun. I kind of miss it when we don't go through all of these, but these are really valuable. Win-win or no deal, integrity, do the right thing, customers always come first, commitment in all things, communication, seek first to understand. And as anything in your detail work can be a little bit sketchy, but if your communication is bad, people they'll forgive you when you've messed up on paperwork, not if it costs them money, but boy, they want communication number one. Creativity, ideas before results, teamwork, together everyone achieves more. Trust starts with honesty, success through people. Okay. And then one of the most important fundamentals in business is well within one's personal life is a decision not only to make commitments, but to keep them. And Mo Anderson was around from, she's been with Gary Keller at Keller Williams for a very long time. I've never met her. I've never gone to one of those They have family reunion in Texas. I've never gone, but she's always there and one of the speakers. Okay, so let's see, what else do we have? Putting it all together. Okay, action plan, prepare for your next class, recall and remember, blah, 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 enhance your learning. Okay, so this. Okay. So we have a page here called recall and remember. What are the 3 options in which a seller can respond to an offer? And I didn't read those out to you as we were, as I was flipping through those pages. But if you want to write these down, if you happen to print this off, but they are number 1, accept, number 2, counter, and number 3, object. So those are the 3 options in which a seller can respond to an offer. What is a seller's disclosure? So does anybody want to just tell me their idea of what a seller's disclosure is?
That's a document that you have to just disclose everything that you know to be true about the property, right?
About physical problems with the property.
Yeah, right, physical problems. And if they don't know, then they put NA.
Correct.
Something like that.
Yep.
I remember filling those out.
Yeah. And, I did not go over a seller net sheet. I personally don't do it. But it says, what is a seller's net sheet? And it says it is an estimate of the seller's closing costs based on a specific offer on the home. So what I do in lieu of that is that I ask, it takes a few days for the title company to get you closing costs, but you can actually, once you've had a transaction or two, you can look at kind of what the numbers are. So closing costs, they vary depending on what. So for example, maybe in lieu of making repairs, you gave them a $5,000 allowance. You wouldn't know that on day 1 when you got when you first accepted the offer. So that's why I don't go into the close, or I don't provide the net sheets. We just do generalities. Because there's a lot of those costs that are split 50-50 with the buyers and the sellers, and it depends on the purchase price of the house and all of that. So I don't do that, but nobody's ever asked me. They'll just say, well, what do you think I'll net out of this? What do you think my costs will be? And I just say, let me get those round numbers from title, and they'll send you an email and me at the same time. So I try not to get into that, because you can, one of the funny things that'll happen, and I've had this happen more than one time, not real frequent, but it has happened from time to time. Believe it or not, a seller will forget that they owe some money. And I had a property in December. We could have closed out in December, which is what they wanted. But he had taken out during that 2006 to 2008, when the economy was so bad and people were getting in trouble with being able to make their payments. He had taken out some sort of state financed loan. And the longer that he was in his house, there was some degree of loan forgiveness. Well, he hadn't quite owned his property long enough to get it totally removed. So every year there was more money that was being removed. If we would have sold and closed in December, which is what the buyers had written their contract for, it would have cost the seller about $8,000. So what we did was we negotiated for the buyers to be able to have early access to the house, rent-free, and then we ended up having to pay their points because they had to get an extension on their loan, and so it cost about $1,500 or something for the difference in the loan extension. So that net sheet I could not have given that seller an accurate number because it came out way late in the process with escrow doing the deep dive into money that was owed. So I just try to stay away from that, and I let those numbers come out to them from title. So it's up to you. It's your business to run, so you can just do it however you wish. And there are apps on like Western Title and I don't know if First American has it, but there are apps that you can get, and you can calculate what their monthly payment would be with whatever percentage of interest based on how much they were putting down. Those apps are kind of fun to play around with. For the most part, I don't have too many people that ask me about that, but you know, from time to time I get that kind of question, but not very often. What is earnest money? So does anybody want to say what your idea of earnest money is?
1% of the asking price.
Yeah, and do you know why they put down the earnest money?
Your good faith deposit.
That is
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah, and that money is held by escrow. And like in the case where my buyers bailed out, they had to, escrow wrote that check to the seller. So, but if they get out, like say in the first 10 days during that inspection period, or they get a red flag that they didn't like with the inspection and they want out. Like I said, in 7 years, that was the only time that I'd ever had somebody get out of a offer, but they can get their earnest money back in the first 10 business days. So if they, you know, maybe somebody lost their job and then all of a sudden they don't want to buy that new house, and so they change their mind. They can, you know, in that first 10 days, they can get it back. Okay, so it says, what are your ahas from the session today? So anybody just pop up and let us know what they are.
I love the idea of the buyer shopping. I want to learn more about that.
Yeah, shopping the buyer. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an incredibly valuable tool. And it's not only beneficial to the buyer, but it's also, oftentimes you get more money for the seller. I just don't understand why people don't use it, but. And I had a lot of strength in doing it because I had been a buyer for lumber. And so I was pretty okay with somebody telling me no. So anybody else?
I liked what you do when you said you put a call into every agent that's put in an offer to let them know that the house is in pending before you click pending. So that they're not finding out after the fact. Cause I think as an agent, that would be, if your client's finding out before you do, that probably doesn't maybe look so great on you, you know?
Yeah.
No, I think it's horrible. And whoops, is everybody still there? Oh, screen sharing, that's okay.
I'm here. I'm here.
I was tired of looking at that
We're
screen.
here.
Good. Hello, everybody. You know, it's kind of like that old golden rule to treat other people like you want to be treated. And you know, it's just, and people will understand more when you tell them no, when you give them good reasons why, rather than getting this cryptic email that, you know, you're a loser for the 10th time. You know, it's difficult. And it also makes that agent look better in the eyes of their buyers, because they can say, I spoke with the listing agent, this is what. And then it's just a lot more clear cut to those agents. And sometimes it's really interesting because you'll say to an agent, I have multiple offers. And then an agent, I had this happen on a house that I got 106,000 over the asking price. And that was about in March or so. It was a crazy house. I don't know how it happened. But the good Lord was looking after that lady because she needed every nickel of that. But anyway, this one agent, I said to him, I have multiple offers. I didn't tell him for how much, but he wrote an offer. And so when I called him and said, it didn't fly. He said, that's okay. He said, I wanted them to, they wanted to make the offer. They knew that they didn't have a real good chance, but they wanted to feel like they were doing something in the process of finding a home. So it wasn't a really huge, shocking disappointment to that particular guy, but he was so thankful that I had taken the time so that he could go back. They were first-time home buyers. And this was a $500,000 house, but they thought it was worth a try. Well, it really wasn't, but you know, he was doing a service to his client, which is what he's supposed to do. And I was doing a service as part of being a listing agent and being communicative with the buyer's agent. So it all worked out fine. And he was very grateful and all that.
Do you feel that a lot of agents do that, what you do, or is it kind of rare?
I'd say it's rare.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Most of the time they'll text, they'll text or they'll send a group email out. And sometimes what I do is I'll just call them up if it's, like say if I wrote my deadline for 9 o'clock, then I'll just call them up and maybe they set their deadline for 6 o'clock and I haven't heard anything. I'll call them at 8 o'clock or whatever. And so it just gets back to that whole communication thing so that you aren't left out there in the wings. And one time I wrote an offer for a house and I had written an escalation clause in it. And this was a house up in Gresham. And I had an expiration for noon on a Monday and I'd showed the property on a Saturday. And so he had told me that he was going to talk to his seller on Monday. So at noon, it's 10 till 12 and I had just gone out to another house where I represented the buyers and I was letting them into their new house. So I have 10 minutes to go before this thing expires. And I call up the agent and I said, hey, I have an expiration on my offer. Do I need to send you an addendum? And he goes, I don't know why. And I go, because it expires in 10 minutes. And he hadn't even read it. He knew that he had it in his hand. He printed it off, but he didn't read when the deadline was because he'd made his appointment for his seller at 5 o'clock. He didn't even read it. I would never have known had I not called him. So I just try to stay on top of stuff as much as I can. And I honestly, I don't like to have more. I've handled 5 on several different occasions. I've had 5 transactions going at one time. But honestly, if they aren't spread out throughout that time period, like getting close to being the beginning or the end of some of them, it is really hard to be really efficient because I don't have an assistant. And yeah, but I work really hard at communicating with everybody. And not everybody has the time, or if they have assistants, then the assistants do it. And, it's kind of your business to craft it however you want and to be whatever kind of professional that you want. But because I had a career selling lumber, I was in all telephone. All of my sales were done on the phone. So I've had a career of being on the phone and talking to people. So to me, it was second nature for me just to call up these people and either ask questions or find out what's going on. And I think when you get right down to it, it's still, a business to business. Person to person business. And people really like to deal with people that they like and that they feel like they're being listened to and all of that. So it's your business to make it what you want. And I just wish all of you all the best, and reach out to me if you have any questions, if I can help you in any way. And if you're local here and need some help, I'd be happy to do that. So does anybody have any final questions for me? Okay, well, we're ending early. Always my goal to end early. And thank you for being patient with my limited skill set in managing all of these screens and everything, but it's been my pleasure to work with you today, and have a great rest of your day, and happy selling, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Linda. That was great.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
you're very
you.
welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.